Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that's going to absolutely blow your minds. What if Issei from high school DxD was actually the reincarnation of Rimuru Tempest from that time I got reincarnated as a slime? Now hold up, before you think this is just some random crossover idea, let me explain why this concept is absolutely broken. We're talking about Rimuru freaking Tempest here, a being who went from a literal slime to a true dragon-level demon lord who could casually delete entire armies with a thought. This guy built an entire nation from scratch, commanded loyalty from beings that could level countries, and had skills like Predator that could literally analyze and absorb any ability. Then you combine that with the boosted gear. The Red Dragon Emperor's power that can multiply strength infinitely. That's not just overpowered, that's reality-breaking insane. But here's where it gets even crazier. Imagine all of Rimuru's political genius, his diplomatic mastery, and his nation-building expertise suddenly awakening in Issei's mind. We're talking about someone who turned monsters and humans into a thriving federation, who negotiated with demon lords and true dragons as equals. Now picture that same tactical brilliance applied to the supernatural politics of high school DxD. The raiding games, the three-faction alliance, the entire power structure of devils, angels, and fallen angels. So we thought, what if we took this concept and explored how Issei's journey would completely transform? This story follows our protagonist as his memories of being the great demon lord Rimuru gradually awaken, turning him from a perverted high schooler into a master strategist who revolutionizes supernatural warfare through unprecedented coordination and teamwork. Watch as he builds alliances that span multiple realities, faces enemies from his past life, and ultimately becomes the Tempest Dragon Emperor, a being whose influence reshapes the very structure of existence itself. If this concept is getting you hyped, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell because we're about to dive deep into some epic storytelling. Alright, let's dive into this masterpiece. The cold bite of steel-piercing flesh should have been the end. Issei had always imagined death would be different, maybe heroic, possibly surrounded by beautiful women mourning his passing. He certainly hadn't expected it to come from the gorgeous girl he'd thought was his first real girlfriend, her black wings spread wide as her light spear carved through his chest. "I'm sorry," Rainier whispered, though her smile suggested otherwise. "You were just unlucky enough to possess a sacred gear." As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, Issei's mind began to fracture. But instead of his life flashing before his eyes, something else entirely flooded his consciousness, memories that weren't his own, yet felt as real as his own heartbeat. A cave, endless darkness, the sensation of being something, formless. "Unique skill, great sage, has been acquired." The voice was mechanical, analytical, nothing like his own internal monologue, yet it felt familiar, comforting even as his body grew cold on the park ground. Memories cascaded through his fading consciousness, building a nation from nothing. Being called Rimuru-sama by devoted followers, the weight of responsibility for thousands of lives, the loneliness of power. The joy of friendship transcending species and prejudice. Raphael, everyone, I'm sorry. His final thought wasn't of the life he was leaving behind, but of the life he felt he was abandoning once again. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the soft sound of classical music and the scent of expensive tea. Issei's eyes fluttered open to find himself staring at an ornate ceiling, his body wrapped in unfamiliar bedsheets that felt far too luxurious for his family's modest home. "Ah, you're awake." The voice was melodious, refined, distinctly feminine. Issei turned his head to find a stunning redhead seated beside his bed, her blue-green eyes watching him with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "I'm Ria's Gremory, I'm a devil, and as of tonight, so are you." "A devil?" Issei's voice came out hoarse, confused. The memories from his death felt like fragments of a vivid dream, yet they clung to his consciousness with surprising tenacity. "But I was killed by a fallen angel, yes." Ria's nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you in time, but I was able to reincarnate you using this." She held up an ornate chess piece, a pawn, glowing with dark energy. "You're part of my devil peerage now." As she spoke, Issei became aware of strange sensations throughout his body. It felt like every cell was vibrating with new energy, but underneath that, something else stirred, a deeper power that felt ancient and familiar. His mind kept drifting back to those impossible memories, commanding armies, negotiating with dragons, the sensation of absorbing and analyzing everything around him. What's happening to me? He thought, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he heard that mechanical voice again, beginning analysis of current situation. Anomalous memory patterns detected. Recommend caution? Are you all right? Riaz leaned forward, genuine concern in her eyes. You seem different somehow. Different, that was an understatement. Issei sat up slowly, his body feeling simultaneously foreign and familiar. I'm just processing a lot right now, these dreams I had while I was unconscious. Dreams can be vivid during reincarnation, Riaz said softly. The soul sometimes reaches across vast distances, touching memories and experiences from elsewhere. The way she said it suggested she knew more than she was letting on, but Issei found himself oddly comfortable with mysteries. In his strange dreams, he'd been someone who unraveled secrets and built understanding from fragments of knowledge. The thought should have been alien to a perverted high schooler, yet it felt natural. What happens now? He asked, surprised by how calm he sounded. Now you learn what it means to be a devil. You'll attend school as normal, but you'll also work for me, helping people with their requests and growing stronger. Riaz smiled warmly. Don't worry, I'll guide you through everything. As she spoke, Issei noticed something peculiar. His mind was automatically cataloging details about her. The precise shade of her hair, the magical energy radiating from her body, the micro-expressions that suggested both authority and genuine kindness. It was as if part of his brain had become a living analysis engine. Observation. Subject demonstrates high magical capacity, noble bearing consistent with leadership role, genuine emotional investment in subordinate welfare. Hypothesis. This individual can be trusted within current parameters. Issei blinked, startled by the clinical assessment that had just run through his mind. Where had that come from? Issei, Riaz tilted her head. You're making some interesting expressions. Sorry, my mind feels different, like I'm seeing things more clearly than before. He paused, then added something that surprised him. Thank you for saving me. I know reincarnation magic must have cost you considerable energy. Riaz's eyebrows rose slightly. Most newly reincarnated devils were either terrified or focused entirely on their own situation. Issei's immediate consideration for the cost to her was unexpected. It's my responsibility to take care of my servants, she said, though her tone was warmer than the formal words suggested. Servants work for payment, Issei replied, again surprising himself with the response. What you've given me is a second chance at life. That makes this more like a family, doesn't it? The silence that followed was comfortable rather than awkward. Riaz studied him with new interest, as if seeing something she hadn't expected. You know, she said finally, I think you're going to fit in with my peerage quite well. The next few days passed in a blur of revelations and adjustments. Issei learned about the supernatural world that existed alongside the mundane one, about devils and angels and the complex politics that governed their interactions. He met the other members of Riaz's peerage. Akaino, whose sadistic smile somehow didn't alarm him as much as it should have. Koneko, whose quiet strength reminded him of someone he couldn't quite remember. And Kiba, whose easy confidence in battle stirred memories of training sword-wielding subordinates. But it was during his first night as a devil that the really strange things began. His dreams were vivid, impossibly detailed narratives of another life entirely. He was a slime, a creature of pure magical energy, who had somehow become the leader of a vast nation. He remembered the faces of his followers with crystal clarity. Shuna's gentle smile, Benimaru's fierce loyalty, Shin's enthusiastic devotion, Diablo's unwavering service. Most clearly of all, he remembered the loneliness of command, balanced against the joy of protecting those who depended on him. He woke with tears on his cheeks and a name on his lips. Rimuru, memory integration at 15% and climbing. Recommend gradual assimilation to avoid psychological fracture. This time, the analytical voice was clear as day. Issei sat up in his bed, looking around his familiar room with new eyes. Great sage, he whispered to the empty air. Affirmative, this individual appears to retain access to certain cognitive enhancement functions from previous existence. Fascinating, Issei's hands trembled slightly. The dreams weren't dreams at all, they were memories. Somehow, impossibly, he was remembering the life of someone else. Someone named Rimuru Tempest, who had built a nation of monsters and had been known as one of the most powerful demon lords in existence. But that's impossible, he murmured. I'm Issei Hyodo. I'm just a perverted high school student who happened to get a sacred gear. Analysis suggests soul-level memory retention from previous incarnation. Current hypothesis. This individual represents a reincarnation of the entity known as Rimuru Tempest, though significant personality divergence has occurred due to different formative experiences. Issei buried his face in his hands. This was insane. He was insane. People didn't just remember past lives, especially not lives as impossibly powerful magical beings from what felt like an entirely different reality. But as he sat there, he became aware of something else, a presence that felt distinctly separate from Great Sage's analytical voice, something draconic and ancient stirring within his left arm. Interesting, came a new voice, deep and resonant with power. Very interesting indeed. It seems my new host is far more complex than he appears. Who? Issei looked down at his left arm where he could feel something shifting beneath his skin. Are you the sacred gear? I am Ddraig, the Red Dragon Emperor, and you, boy, are not what you seem to be. The presence grew stronger, more focused. I can sense layers to your soul, memories of power that rivals my own. Tell me, do you remember being called a demon lord? The question hit Issei like a physical blow. Because yes, he did remember. He remembered the weight of that title, the responsibility it carried, and the strength required to bear it. This is crazy, he whispered. Perhaps, but crazy or not, it means you have the potential to be the most interesting host I've had in centuries. Ddraig's amusement was palpable. The question is, what will you do with memories of such power? Issei thought about that question as he prepared for another day of school. What would he do? In his memories as Rimuru, power had been a tool for protecting others and building something better. It had never been an end in itself. Looking in the mirror, he saw the same face he'd always had, but there was something different in his eyes, a depth that hadn't been there before. I'll protect my friends, he said quietly. Just like I did before, analysis concurs. Primary motivation remains consistent with previous incarnation, protection of valued individuals and communities. Great Sage's voice held what might have been approval. Not the answer I expected from the supposedly perverted Red Dragon Emperor, Ddraig mused. This should prove most entertaining. School felt surreal. Issei went through the motions of being an ordinary student, but his enhanced analytical abilities made everything seem almost absurdly simple. He found himself understanding complex mathematical concepts that had previously been beyond him, and his increased pattern recognition made it easy to predict how his teachers and classmates would behave. More concerning was his changing appetite. The school lunch that had always satisfied him now seemed inadequate, and he found himself craving more, not just food, but knowledge, experiences, understanding. It was as if something within him wanted to devour and analyze everything around him. During lunch, he sat with his usual companions, Matsuda and Madohama, but found their conversations about girls and perverted schemes oddly hollow. He still appreciated feminine beauty, certainly, but the crude objectification that had once seemed natural now felt juvenile. Yo, Issei, Matsuda elbowed him. You've been weird lately. You barely even reacted when Kadace walked by in that short skirt. Just got a lot on my mind, Issei replied, which was certainly true. Don't tell me you're going through one of those phases where you pretend to be mature to impress some girl, Madohama said with a sneer. We all know you're just as perverted as us. Am I? Issei wondered. The memories in his head belonged to someone who had certainly appreciated beauty but had also commanded respect and loyalty from thousands of followers. Someone who had been capable of genuine love and sacrifice. Maybe I'm just growing up a little, he said finally. His friends laughed, but Issei noticed they seemed less comfortable with his response than they pretended to be. That afternoon brought his first official devil job, a simple request to find a lost cat. In the past, Issei might have grumbled about such a mundane task, but something about the elderly woman's worried expression reminded him of the citizens of Tempest who had brought their problems to him. Don't worry, he told her with a gentle smile that seemed to surprise her. I'll find your cat. The search should have taken hours, but Issei found his enhanced senses made tracking the animal surprisingly straightforward. He could detect the faint scent trail, hear the soft sounds of movement that others would miss, and use logical deduction to predict where a scared cat might hide. He found the tabby trapped in a storm drain, too frightened to respond to calls. In the past, Issei might have tried to lure it out with food or called for help. Instead, he found himself doing something that felt completely natural, extending his hand and releasing a subtle pulse of magical energy that conveyed safety and reassurance. The cat immediately calmed and allowed him to lift it free. As he handed the pet back to its grateful owner, Issei realized what he'd done shouldn't have been possible. That kind of empathetic magical communication was advanced magic, far beyond what a newly reincarnated devil should be capable of. Analysis: subject demonstrates instinctive access to advanced magical techniques consistent with previous incarnations' abilities. More concerning was what happened next. As he accepted the woman's tearful thanks, Issei felt an overwhelming urge to understand more about her situation. Her house was too large for one person, her garden showed signs of careful tending but recent neglect, and her magical signature carried traces of old grief. Without consciously deciding to do so, Issei activated a skill he shouldn't have known: Predator. The world exploded with information. He could suddenly sense every detail about the woman's life. Her husband's death 3 years prior, her struggles with loneliness, her declining health that made caring for her garden difficult, even the specific brand of tea she preferred. The knowledge flowed into him like water, analyzed and categorized with mechanical efficiency. Warning: unauthorized skill activation detected. Predator ability should not be accessible in current form. Issei stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of information. The woman reached out to steady him, concern evident in her eyes. "Are you all right, young man?" I'm fine," Issei managed, though his mind was reeling. He'd used Predator Rimuru's signature ability to analyze a human being. The skill shouldn't exist in this world, and he certainly shouldn't be able to access it. As he walked home, Issei's mind churned with possibilities and concerns. The memories weren't just fragments of another life. Somehow, he was gaining access to actual abilities from his previous incarnation. Skills that belonged to one of the most powerful beings in existence. The question, Ddraig's voice rumbled through his thoughts, is whether you're becoming him or he's becoming you. Issei paused on the sidewalk, watching ordinary humans go about their evening routines. They had no idea that supernatural beings walked among them, that devils and angels and fallen angels played games of power with their world as the prize. In his memories, Rimuru had started as something small and seemingly insignificant, then grown into a leader who protected both monsters and humans alike. He'd built bridges between different species and created a nation where former enemies could coexist peacefully. Looking up at the evening sky, Issei made a decision that would shape everything that followed. "I don't know if I'm becoming him or staying me," he murmured, "but either way, I'm going to protect the people I care about, and maybe I can build something better in this world too." Analysis: goal parameters established. Recommend gradual skill integration to avoid unwanted attention while building necessary power base. "Now that," Ddraig said with satisfaction, "sounds like the beginning of something truly interesting." As Issei headed home, none of them, not Great Sage, not Ddraig, not even Issei himself, realized that their conversation had been monitored by magical surveillance spells placed throughout the city. In a darkened room elsewhere in Kyoto, several figures studied readouts that showed magical signatures unlike anything in their databases. "The anomalous devil is definitely more than he appears," one of them said quietly. "His power readings don't match any known sacred gear or devil ability. Should we report this to our superiors? Not yet, let's gather more data first. If this individual really does possess unknown capabilities, we need to understand the full scope before taking action." As they spoke, none of them noticed the small bat hanging from the window outside their meeting room, a bat whose red eyes glowed with intelligence as it listened to every word before disappearing silently into the night. The wheels of fate had been set in motion, and the supernatural world was about to discover that some souls carry legacies that transcend death itself. The Occult Research Club's meeting room felt different now. Where once Issei might have been distracted by Ria's beauty or Akeno's teasing smile, he found himself automatically analyzing the magical resonance of the space, cataloging the defensive enchantments woven into the walls, noting the subtle power dynamics between the club members. Environmental analysis complete. Multiple high-level magical practitioners detected. Recommend cautious information sharing. Great Sage's voice had become clearer over the past week, no longer the faint whisper he'd initially dismissed as imagination. The analytical commentary now felt as natural as his own thoughts, though distinctly separate from his personality. Issei, Riaz began, her voice carrying a note of concern. We need to discuss what happened during your job yesterday, the elderly woman's case. Issei had filed a standard report, but he'd been careful to omit the details about Predator. Still, it seemed his caution hadn't been sufficient. The client was very complimentary about your work, Akeno added with her characteristic smile. She said you seemed to understand her situation intuitively. That level of empathy is unusual for a newly reincarnated devil. Koneko, who rarely spoke during meetings, looked directly at him. Your scent has changed. You smell older somehow. Observation, enhanced supernatural senses are detecting soul-level anomalies. Recommend partial disclosure to maintain trust while protecting sensitive information. Issei met each of their gazes, feeling the weight of Rimuru's memories guiding his response. In his past life, he'd learned that selective honesty often worked better than complete deception, especially with people whose loyalty you needed. I've been having dreams, he said finally. Vivid dreams about another life, someone who cared for others the way I want to care for all of you. The admission hung in the air. Riaz leaned forward, her analytical mind clearly working through the implications. Soul memories, she murmured. It's rare, but powerful souls sometimes retain echoes from previous incarnations. The trauma of death and reincarnation can sometimes unlock these memories. Is that what you think is happening? Issei asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. It would explain the changes we've observed, Kiba interjected. Your combat instincts during the stray devil hunt were remarkably advanced for someone with no formal training. That had been another close call. When they'd encountered the stray devil terrorizing the warehouse district, Issei had moved with tactical precision that surprised everyone, including himself. He positioned himself to protect the others while creating optimal attack angles, coordinated their movements with subtle gestures, and anticipated the enemy's patterns in ways that should have been impossible for a novice. Memory integration at 37% and climbing, combat experience and tactical knowledge increasingly accessible. The dreams are becoming more frequent, Issei continued, deciding to share a bit more. I remember leading people, protecting them, making difficult decisions for their welfare. It feels like someone I was, or someone I could become. Well said, partner, Ddraig's voice rumbled through his consciousness. I must admit, these memories intrigue me as well. The power I sense in you continues to grow, but it's unlike anything I've encountered in my long existence. Privately, Issei had been having regular conversations with the Red Dragon Emperor. Unlike most sacred gear hosts who required years to establish clear communication with their partners, Issei had achieved full mental contact within days. Ddraig attributed this to the layered nature of Issei's soul. Have you discussed this with your sacred gear? Riaz asked, as if reading his thoughts. Ddraig is interested in the development, Issei said carefully. He says my power growth is unprecedented. That was an understatement. Over the past week, Issei had experimented cautiously with his abilities when alone. He discovered he could use minor versions of several of Rimuru's skills: enhanced analysis capabilities, limited material absorption, basic magical sensing, and most remarkably, rapid adaptation to new techniques. Yesterday, while practicing basic devil magic, he'd accidentally absorbed and perfectly replicated a complex barrier spell that Kiba had demonstrated. The Knight Peaceholder had been stunned to see his technique reproduced flawlessly after a single viewing. Perhaps we should arrange some advanced training sessions, Riaz suggested. If you're accessing memories of combat experience, we should help you integrate that knowledge safely. I'd like that, Issei replied, and meant it. The growing disconnect between his expanding capabilities and his official novice status was becoming harder to maintain. Akeno clapped her hands together. Wonderful. I have some ideas for exercises that might help you explore your abilities more thoroughly. The sadistic gleam in her eyes should have been concerning, but Issei found himself oddly untroubled. Rimuru's memories included extensive experience with powerful subordinates who had unique personalities. If anything, Akeno reminded him of some of the more enthusiastic demon generals he'd worked with. Before we begin any intensive training, Riaz said, her tone becoming more serious, there's something else we need to address. The incident with Rainier has attracted attention from other factions. Predictable. Fallen angel activities in neutral territory would trigger surveillance protocols from multiple supernatural factions. What kind of attention? Issei asked, though Great Sage's analysis had already provided him with several likely scenarios. The church has expressed interest in any sacred gear wielders who survived fallen angel attacks, Kiba explained, his expression darkening slightly. Their methods of protection aren't always benevolent. Additionally, Rias continued, some of the other devil families have taken note of your unusual power signature. Your performance in practice sessions has been noticed, Issei nodded thoughtfully. In Rimuru's memories, rapid advancement had always attracted both allies and enemies. The key was managing the political implications while continuing to grow stronger. What do you recommend? He asked. Excellent response. Demonstrates respect for established authority while showing strategic thinking. Rias smiled, clearly pleased by his mature reaction. For now, we continue your training while being cautious about public displays of power. I'll handle the political aspects, but you should be prepared for increased scrutiny. As the meeting broke up, Akeno approached him with a conspiratorial whisper. Ara Issei-kun, you've become quite interesting lately. I look forward to our training sessions. After the others left, Issei remained behind with Rias. She studied him with those piercing blue-green eyes, clearly seeing more than she was saying. The soul memories, she said quietly, they're not just combat knowledge, are they? Issei considered his response carefully. No, whoever I was before, they cared deeply about their people. They built something meaningful, something that protected the innocent and gave hope to the hopeless. And you want to do the same thing here? I want to protect my friends, Issei said simply. Whatever power I'm gaining, whatever memories I'm recovering, that's what I want to use them for. Rias was quiet for a long moment, then, unexpectedly, she smiled. You know, when I first reincarnated you, I saw potential for a powerful pawn. But I think you might become something much more significant than that. That evening, Issei sat in his room with a collection of textbooks spread before him. To his parents, it looked like he was finally taking his studies seriously. In reality, he was conducting a systematic analysis of this world's magical theory using Great Sage's computational abilities. Magical system analysis 60% complete. Significant theoretical gaps detected in current educational materials. Recommend seeking advanced texts. The more he learned about this world's supernatural mechanics, the more he realized how much potential for improvement existed. Devil society was remarkably conservative, clinging to traditions that limited their growth. The church operated on dogmatic principles that prevented innovation. Even the fallen angels seemed trapped in cycles of conflict that served no constructive purpose. Just like the world I left behind before we changed things, he thought. In his memories, Rimuru had transformed a chaotic realm of constant conflict into a peaceful federation where former enemies worked together toward common goals. The challenges had been immense, but the rewards, seeing people live without fear, watching former outcasts find purpose and belonging, had made every struggle worthwhile. Analysis. Current supernatural political structure exhibits multiple systemic inefficiencies. Significant opportunity for constructive reform exists. But not yet, Issei murmured aloud. First, I need to understand the full scope of the problems, and I need to become strong enough to actually make a difference. Agreed. Recommend continued skill development while building network of reliable allies. His phone buzzed with a text message. Matsuda complaining about homework and asking if Issei wanted to check out the new adult magazine that had come out. A week ago, he might have been interested. Now, the message felt like it came from someone living in a completely different world. Instead of responding, Issei returned to his magical studies. He had work to do. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to Kyoto Academy. Issei sensed them before he saw them, 3 figures whose magical signatures were unlike anything in his experience. Not devils, not fallen angels, but something else entirely. Analysis, unknown supernatural entities detected, power levels significant, recommend caution. During lunch break, Rias summoned the entire peerage to the club room with unusual urgency. We have a situation, she announced as soon as everyone arrived. Representatives from the church have arrived in Kyoto. They're investigating irregularities in local sacred gear manifestations. They're here about me, Issei said. It wasn't a question. Most likely, your sacred gear's recent evolution patterns don't match their databases. Rias looked troubled. Normally, I could simply invoke territorial rights as a high-class devil, but given your unusual circumstances, they might push for a direct examination, Akeno finished, her playful demeanor replaced by serious concern. Koneko cracked her knuckles. Let them try. We can't simply fight representatives of heaven, Kiba pointed out. It would cause a diplomatic incident. Issei found himself thinking through the problem with analytical clarity that surprised him. Church investigators would have specific protocols, predictable behavior patterns, limited authority for independent action. What if we gave them what they expect to see? He suggested. A newly reincarnated devil with an unusual but not unprecedented sacred gear evolution? Excellent strategic thinking. Recommend controlled demonstration that satisfies curiosity while concealing true capabilities. You want to let them examine you? Riaz looked skeptical. I want to show them exactly what they're prepared to understand, nothing more, Issei clarified. If I can demonstrate that I'm developing along predictable parameters, they'll lose interest. What he didn't mention was Great Sage's analysis of church investigative procedures. The memories from his past life included extensive experience with bureaucratic organizations, and he was confident he could navigate their protocols successfully. It's risky, Akeno said thoughtfully, but it might work. If we can satisfy their curiosity without revealing the full extent of your abilities, then they'll file a report that closes the investigation, Issei finished. One controlled risk now to prevent ongoing scrutiny. Riaz looked impressed despite her concern. You're thinking several moves ahead. Very well, but we do this carefully with the entire peerage ready to intervene if necessary. The meeting took place in the school's conference room, neutral ground that satisfied both sides' requirements. The three church representatives were exactly what Issei had expected, professional, courteous, and absolutely determined to complete their mission. Mr. Hyodo, the lead investigator, a middle-aged man with calculating eyes, began, "We understand you recently experienced a sacred gear awakening under traumatic circumstances." "That's correct," Issei replied calmly. "I was attacked by a fallen angel and nearly died. When Riaz-senpai saved me, my sacred gear manifested." "May we see it?" Issei raised his left hand, allowing the familiar red gauntlet to materialize. The investigators leaned forward with professional interest. "Recommend standard boosted gear demonstration. Avoid any non-typical manifestations." "Boost," Issei said simply, feeling the familiar surge of power that doubled his current abilities. The investigators made notes, clearly comparing what they observed to their reference materials. "The power multiplication appears standard," one of them murmured. "Energy signature matches expected parameters for a newly awakened boosted gear. Excellent. They are seeing exactly what their preconceptions prepared them to find. Have you experienced any unusual dreams or memories since the awakening?" the lead investigator asked. This was the critical moment. Issei allowed a hint of uncertainty to show in his expression. "Sometimes I have dreams about fighting, I suppose, but I assumed that was normal for someone with a combat-type sacred gear." "Indeed. The boosted gear often imparts instinctive knowledge of battle tactics." The investigator made another note. "Have you attempted any techniques beyond basic power multiplication?" "Not yet. Riaz-senpai wants me to master the fundamentals before advancing to more complex applications." Perfect response. Demonstrates proper caution while explaining lack of advanced demonstrations. The examination continued for another 20 minutes, but Issei could tell the investigators were satisfied. His responses matched their expectations, his power demonstrations fit their models, and his apparent deference to Riaz suggested proper integration into Devil Society. Finally, the lead investigator stood. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Hyodo. Our preliminary assessment suggests your sacred gear is developing along normal parameters. We'll file a standard report with no recommendations for further action." After they left, Riaz turned to Issei with a mixture of admiration and concern. "That was expertly handled," she said, "but it concerns me how naturally deception comes to you now." "Not deception," Issei corrected gently, "selective truth-telling. Everything I said was accurate, I simply didn't mention details they weren't prepared to understand." Analysis. Response demonstrates sophisticated understanding of information management and political communication. "The person you're remembering," Riaz said thoughtfully, "they dealt with this kind of situation often, didn't they?" "Yes. Leading others means sometimes protecting them from truths they're not ready for, but it also means never losing sight of what you're ultimately trying to achieve." That evening, as Issei reflected on the day's events, he realized something significant had occurred. For the first time since his reincarnation, he'd consciously used Rimuru's diplomatic and leadership experience to solve a complex problem. The integration of his two identities was accelerating. Memory integration at 45%, personality synthesis proceeding smoothly. Recommend continued gradual advancement. I must say, partner, Ddraig's voice carried a note of approval. Your handling of that situation was impressive. You're becoming quite the interesting host. Thank you, Issei replied silently. But this is just the beginning. If I'm going to protect everyone I care about, I need to become much stronger. As he drifted off to sleep, Issei's dreams were filled with memories of another world, a world where he'd built something beautiful from nothing, where former enemies had become trusted friends, where hope had triumphed over despair. When he woke, he would continue building toward that same future in this new world. But first, he had a rating game to prepare for. The announcement came during the weekly peerage meeting, delivered with Ria's characteristic blend of authority and concern. We've been challenged to a rating game, she said, her crimson hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the clubroom windows. Riser Fenix has grown impatient with our engagement and demanded a formal match to settle the matter. Issei felt a familiar surge of protective anger, but it was tempered now by analytical consideration. Great Sage immediately began processing the political implications while his inherited memories provided context about arranged marriages and their role in maintaining supernatural power structures. Analysis. Opponent likely possesses regenerative abilities based on surname association with Phoenix mythology. Recommend comprehensive intelligence gathering and tactical preparation. When? Akeno asked, though her tone suggested she already knew they wouldn't have long to prepare. 10 days, Rias replied grimly. Barely enough time for intensive training, let alone developing new strategies. Issei studied the faces of his teammates, his family really. Kiba's jaw was set with determination. Akeno maintained her composure despite the tight timeline, and Koneko was already stretching as if preparing for immediate combat. They were all ready to fight for their king's freedom, but Issei could see the underlying worry in their expressions. In his memories as Rimuru, he'd faced similar situations, powerful opponents with seemingly insurmountable advantages, impossible timelines, the weight of others' lives depending on his decisions. But he'd also learned something crucial. Individual power meant nothing without proper strategy and coordination. What do we know about Riser's peerage? Issei asked, his voice carrying authority that surprised everyone present, including himself. Rias blinked, clearly not expecting such a tactical question from her newest member. He has a full peerage, 15 pieces including himself. His specialty is fire magic enhanced by Phoenix regeneration, and his servants are chosen for complementary abilities. Insufficient data. Recommend detailed intelligence gathering on individual capabilities, tactical preferences, and potential weaknesses. That's not enough information to develop an effective counter strategy, Issei said, leaning forward. We need to know their individual fighting styles, preferred formations, psychological profiles if possible. A team is only as strong as its coordination. The room fell silent. Kiba looked intrigued. Akeno seemed delighted by this new aspect of Issei's personality, and Koneko was studying him with her usual directness. You're thinking like a general, Rias observed, her tone mixing surprise with growing interest. Issei paused, realizing how naturally the strategic mindset had emerged. In his memories, he'd commanded armies, coordinated massive military campaigns, and developed tactics that had secured victory against numerically superior forces. Those experiences were becoming increasingly accessible. Sorry, he said, slightly embarrassed. The dreams I've been having, they include a lot of military experience. I guess it's affecting how I think about problems. Memory integration at 52%. Military command protocols and tactical analysis systems fully accessible. Don't apologize, Rias said firmly. If you have strategic knowledge that can help us, I want to hear it. Issei took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. The memories of countless war councils, of balancing competing priorities and limited resources, flowed through his consciousness like a familiar song. First, we need complete intelligence on every member of Riser's peerage. Not just their abilities, but their personalities, relationships with each other, combat experience levels. A team that's fought together for years will have established patterns, habitual responses we can exploit. He moved to the whiteboard, beginning to sketch out a basic organizational chart. Second, we need to identify their likely strategy. Riser's immortality makes him overconfident. He'll probably use aggressive frontal assault tactics, relying on his regeneration to overcome superior positioning. Correct analysis. Phoenix-type regeneration abilities often result in predictable tactical over-reliance on durability rather than strategic thinking. Third, Issei continued, his voice gaining confidence as the memories guided his analysis. We need to maximize our own coordination. 10 days isn't enough to develop entirely new abilities, but it's plenty of time to create combination attacks and establish communication protocols. Akeno clapped slowly, her eyes bright with interest. Ara Issei-kun, you sound like you've commanded armies before. The comment hit closer to home than she realized. In his memories, he had commanded armies, diverse forces of humans, monsters, and spirits united under his leadership. He'd fought wars, negotiated treaties, and built a nation from scattered tribes and refugees. Maybe I have, he said quietly, then looked directly at Riaz. If you're willing to trust me, I think I can develop a strategy that gives us a real chance of winning. Recommend full disclosure of tactical capabilities to maximize team effectiveness. Current trust levels support expanded information sharing. Riaz was quiet for a long moment, studying his face as if seeing him for the first time. The person in your dreams, they were a leader, weren't they? Yes. Someone who protected people by bringing them together, by helping them become stronger than they could be alone. Issei met her gaze steadily. Someone who understood that victory isn't about individual power, it's about turning a group of individuals into something greater. Very well, Riaz said finally. I'm placing you in charge of tactical planning for this raiding game. Everyone will follow your strategic directives. The formal transfer of military authority felt natural, comfortable in a way that should have been alarming. But as Issei looked around the room at his teammates, his subordinates now, in a sense, he felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Command authority acknowledged. Recommend immediate implementation of comprehensive training and preparation protocols. All right, Issei said, turning back to the whiteboard. Let's start with what we know about Riser's capabilities, then we'll build our counter-strategy from there. The next 3 days were intensive information gathering. Issei had requested detailed files on every member of Riser's peerage, and Riaz had used her family connections to acquire comprehensive dossiers. As he studied the intelligence reports, patterns began emerging. Analysis complete. Opponent team composition optimized for overwhelming offensive power rather than tactical flexibility. Multiple exploitable weaknesses identified. Riser's peerage was indeed formidable. His queen was a former Valkyrie with centuries of combat experience. His knights specialized in speed-based harassment tactics, and his bishop possessed area denial capabilities that could control entire sections of a battlefield. But they'd been fighting together for decades, which meant their coordination was predictable. More importantly, they were accustomed to winning through superior individual power rather than complex strategy. Riser's immortality had made them overconfident, careless about defense because they expected their king to simply regenerate through any damage. Koneko, Issei called, not looking up from his tactical notes. How long can you maintain enhanced strength without fatigue? Depends on the enhancement level, she replied. Maximum output for maybe 5 minutes, sustainable enhancement for an hour or more. Good. Kiba, your swords can cut through magical barriers, correct? Some barriers. It depends on the strength and type of enchantment. Recommend testing against progressively stronger magical defenses to establish precise limitations. We'll test that tomorrow. Akeno, your lightning magic, can you maintain continuous low-level electrical fields, or do you need to discharge in bursts? I can maintain field effects, Akeno said, looking intrigued by the direction of his questions. Are you planning something specific? Several somethings, Issei replied, finally looking up from his notes. But first, I need to understand our absolute capabilities. No false modesty, no holding back. I need to know exactly what each of you can do. Over the following hours, he systematically cataloged every ability, technique, and tactical option available to their team. The process reminded him of similar assessments he'd conducted in his past life, evaluating the strengths of his subordinates to maximize their effectiveness in battle. What emerged was a picture of a team with enormous potential that had never been properly coordinated. Each member was formidable individually, but they'd been fighting as talented individuals rather than as a unified force. The problem, Issei explained as he sketched formations on the whiteboard, is that we've been thinking like a traditional devil peerage. Individual pieces with specialized roles supporting the king in direct confrontation. That's how raiding games are supposed to work, Riaz pointed out. That's how they usually work, Issei corrected. But unusual situations call for unusual tactics. What if we treated this like asymmetric warfare instead of a traditional engagement? Excellent strategic thinking. Asymmetric tactics maximize advantages of smaller, more flexible forces against larger, more conventional opponents. He began outlining his preliminary strategy, drawing on memories of campaigns where he'd faced numerically superior enemies. The key was to avoid playing by the opponent's rules to create conditions where their advantages became liabilities. We're not going to fight Riser's peerage, he said finally. We're going to make them fight each other. The training that followed was unlike anything the Occult Research Club had experienced before. Instead of individual skill development, Issei focused on combination techniques and tactical coordination. He drilled them on communication protocols, established fallback positions for every scenario, and created contingency plans for dozens of possible complications. But more than the tactical training, he worked on changing their mindset. In his memories as Rimuru, one of his greatest strengths had been his ability to inspire others to exceed their perceived limitations. He transformed frightened refugees into proud citizens, turned former enemies into trusted allies, and built loyalty that transcended species and cultural barriers. Kiba, he said during a particularly intense training session, you're still thinking like a knight. Stop trying to be the fastest piece on the board and start thinking about how to make everyone else more effective. What do you mean? Your swords aren't just weapons, they're tools for battlefield control. You can create barriers, establish choke points, even provide mobile cover for the others. Your speed means you can be anywhere on the battlefield in seconds. Use that to enable your teammates, not just to engage enemies directly. Correct application of force multiplication principles. Individual excellence serves team effectiveness. Similar conversations happened with each team member. Akaino learned to think of her magic as area denial rather than direct attack. Koneko began practicing techniques that would let her serve as an mobile anchor point for team formations. Even Riaz started adapting her destructive magic for tactical support rather than overwhelming offense. But the most significant changes were happening within Issei himself. As he guided his teammates through complex training exercises, the memories of leadership became increasingly vivid. He remembered the satisfaction of watching subordinates grow beyond their original capabilities, the weight of making decisions that affected thousands of lives, the joy of building something meaningful from chaos and conflict. Memory integration at 68%, leadership protocols and diplomatic skills fully accessible, personality synthesis proceeding optimally. You know, partner, Ddraig's voice carried a note of genuine interest. I'm beginning to understand why your soul feels so familiar. The power I sense within you, it's not just strength, it's the authority that comes from having genuinely cared for others. Is that unusual for sacred gear users? Issei asked during a quiet moment between training sessions. Extremely, most of my previous hosts were driven by personal ambition, revenge, or simple lust for power. You're the first who seems more concerned with protecting others than enhancing yourself. Analysis. This individual's primary motivation remains consistent with previous incarnation, protection and advancement of valued community members. That evening, as Issei reviewed tactical plans and refined their strategy, he found himself thinking about the nature of leadership. In his memories, Rimuru had never sought power for its own sake. Every ability gained, every position accepted, every difficult decision made had been in service of protecting and improving the lives of others. Looking at his teammates, Riaz struggling with the burden of an unwanted engagement, Akaino hiding her pain behind a cheerful mask, Kiba carrying the weight of his tragic past, Koneko protecting herself through emotional distance. He felt the same protective instincts awakening. They weren't just his peerage members, they were his people, his responsibility, his family, and he would do whatever was necessary to protect them. 6 days before the raiding game, their preparation was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Surzech-sama, Riaz said, bowing respectfully as her brother materialized in the clubroom. This is unexpected. The current Lucifer smiled warmly, but Issei could sense the underlying tension in his posture. In his enhanced perception, Surzech radiated power that dwarfed anything he'd encountered in this world so far, but there was also curiosity and perhaps a touch of concern. Analysis: extremely high-level magical practitioner. Power signature suggests transcendent class abilities. Recommend extreme caution and respectful behavior. Hello, Riaz. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I've been hearing interesting reports about your newest peerage member. His gaze settled on Issei with friendly interest. Issei Hyodo, I presume? Yes, sir, Issei replied, bowing respectfully but not submissively. The memories of diplomatic protocol guided his response: show proper respect without appearing weak or intimidated. I understand you've been serving as tactical coordinator for the upcoming raiding game. That's rather unusual for such a new devil. Issei has been having dreams, Riaz explained carefully. Memories of someone with extensive military experience. His strategic insights have been remarkable. Surzech studied Issei with eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. Dreams of military command, how fascinating. Tell me, Issei, in these dreams, what kind of leader were you? The question felt loaded with significance. Issei considered his response carefully, aware that his answer might determine how the most powerful devil in existence viewed him going forward. Someone who believed that true strength came from bringing people together, he said finally. Someone who understood that a leader's job isn't to be the strongest person in the room, it's to help everyone else become stronger than they thought possible. Excellent response. Demonstrates sophisticated understanding of leadership philosophy while avoiding specific details about previous incarnation. Surzech was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. That's a remarkably mature perspective for someone so young. These dreams of yours, they must be quite vivid to have such a profound impact on your thinking. They feel real, Issei admitted, more real than memories should be. But whether they're actually memories or just dreams, the principles they've taught me seem worth following. Indeed they do, Surzech smiled, and the tension in the room seemed to ease slightly. Well, I look forward to seeing how you apply these principles in the upcoming match. From what I understand, you're planning something rather unconventional. We're planning to win, Issei said simply. The Lucifer laughed, clearly delighted by the confident response. I'm sure you are. Very well, I won't interfere with your preparations. But Issei, after the raiding game, I'd very much like to have a longer conversation with you about these dreams of yours. After Surzech left, the room remained quiet for several minutes. That was interesting, Akeno said finally. He seemed quite taken with you, Issei-kun. The Mao don't usually take personal interest in low-ranking devils, Kiba added thoughtfully. Your reputation is apparently spreading beyond Kyo. Analysis: high-level political attention confirms exceptional nature of current situation. Recommend continued careful management of public persona. Issei nodded, but his mind was already returning to tactical preparations. Political implications could be dealt with after they'd secured Ria's freedom. Right now, he had a raiding game to win. All right, he said, turning back to their training materials. Let's run through the combination sequences one more time. We need to be perfect. As his teammates resumed their positions, Issei felt the familiar weight of command settling over him like a comfortable cloak. In 4 days, they would face an opponent with superior numbers, greater experience, and seemingly insurmountable advantages. But they had something Riser's peerage lacked. Unity of purpose, innovative tactics, and a leader who had learned from the greatest demon lord in existence how to transform individual strengths into collective victory. The raiding game was going to be very interesting indeed. The night before the raiding game, Issei found himself unable to sleep. His mind churned with tactical possibilities, contingency plans, and the weight of responsibility for his team's lives. As he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a familiar presence stirred within his consciousness. Partner, Ddraig's voice resonated through his mind with unusual gravity. I believe it's time we had a proper conversation. The world around Issei shifted, and suddenly he was standing in a vast mental space that resembled a dragon's lair, ancient stone walls covered in mystical symbols, treasures scattered across the floor, and at the center, the massive form of the Red Dragon Emperor himself. Ddraig was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Scales that gleamed like fresh blood, eyes that burned with the wisdom of millennia, and a presence that spoke of power beyond mortal comprehension. Yet as Issei looked upon the legendary dragon, he felt no fear, only recognition. You're not intimidated, Ddraig observed with interest. Most hosts require considerable time to adjust to my presence in their minds. I've seen dragons before, Issei replied, memories of Veldora flooding through his consciousness. In my dreams, I remember friendship with a dragon, partnership. Yes, I can sense that connection within your soul. Tell me, partner, what do you remember about dragons? Issei closed his eyes, allowing the memories to surface. Veldora's boisterous laughter, his childlike enthusiasm for manga and games, the deep bond of friendship that had transcended their vastly different natures. The storm dragon had been one of his most trusted allies and cherished companions. I remember that dragons aren't just powerful, they're proud, intelligent, loyal to those who earn their respect. I remember that true friendship with a dragon is worth more than any treasure. Fascinating. Ddraig leaned forward, his massive head coming closer to Issei's comparatively tiny form. In all my centuries of existence, across dozens of hosts, you are the first to speak of dragons as companions rather than sources of power. Analysis. Draconic entity demonstrates genuine curiosity rather than typical sacred gear dominance patterns. Recommend continued honest communication. Great sage, Issei said aloud, causing Ddraig's eyes to widen with surprise. That voice, I can hear it as well. Partner, what exactly are you? Issei took a deep breath, realizing that the time for partial truths had passed. If he was going to lead his team to victory tomorrow, he needed Ddraig as a true partner, not just a source of power. I think I'm the reincarnation of someone called Rimuru Tempest. He was a slime who became a demon lord who built a nation of monsters and humans living together in peace. And he had a best friend who was a dragon, Veldora, the storm dragon. The silence that followed was profound. Ddraig's eyes burned with intense concentration as he processed this revelation. A slime who became a demon lord, he repeated slowly. That would explain the layered nature of your soul, the unprecedented adaptation rate, the instinctive leadership abilities. Confirmed. Previous incarnation maintained close partnership with draconic entity of comparable power level to current host. Great sage, Ddraig addressed the analytical voice directly. You were this Rimuru's companion as well, weren't you? Affirmative. This unit served as primary analytical and advisory system for the entity known as Rimuru Tempest across multiple evolutionary stages and major conflicts. Ddraig was quiet for a long moment, his ancient mind working through the implications. I have existed for millennia, partnered with heroes and villains, witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Never have I encountered a soul that carries the memories of genuine friendship with my kind. Does it change anything? Issei asked. Between us, everything and nothing, Ddraig replied with what might have been amusement. You are still my host, I am still your sacred gear, but now I understand why you feel different from the others. You don't seek to use my power, you seek to partner with it. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Every previous host had viewed Ddraig as a tool to be mastered, a source of strength to be exploited. Issei, carrying Rimuru's memories of true friendship with Veldora, approached their relationship as a collaboration between equals. There's something else, Ddraig continued, his tone becoming more serious. The memories you carry, the power you're developing, they're attracting attention from forces beyond this world. I can sense observers, entities from other dimensions who have taken notice of your unique nature. Analysis. Dimensional stability fluctuations detected in local spacetime. Multiple extra-dimensional observation attempts identified. Is that a problem? Issei asked, though Rimuru's memories suggested it probably was. Potentially. Your soul's connection to another reality creates ripples that certain beings find interesting. For now, they're merely watching. But as your power grows, as you integrate more of your past self's abilities, they might decide to intervene directly, Issei finished. In his memories, Rimuru had faced similar situations, powerful entities from other worlds who saw him as either a threat or an opportunity. Precisely, which brings me to my proposal. Ddraig's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Your memories include techniques and abilities that exist outside this world's power systems. If we work together, truly together, as partners rather than host and sacred gear, we might be able to integrate those abilities with my draconic power. The implications were staggering. Issei's memories contained skills like Predator, Universal Synthesis, and Absolute Defense, abilities that had made Rimuru one of the most formidable beings in existence. combined with the boosted gear's power multiplication. It would be unprecedented, Issei said thoughtfully. Indeed, and potentially very dangerous. Combining power systems that were never meant to interact could have unpredictable results. Analysis. Risk assessment indicates significant potential benefits outweigh probable negative consequences. Recommend controlled experimental integration. We'd need to be careful, Issei said. Start small, test each combination thoroughly before attempting anything major. Agreed, and partner, this level of cooperation will require absolute trust between us. No secrets, no hidden agendas. Are you prepared for that kind of partnership? Issei thought about Veldora, about the absolute trust that had existed between him and the storm dragon. They had shared everything: power, knowledge, even consciousness when necessary. It was the kind of bond that made them both stronger than they could ever be alone. Yes, he said simply. I am, then let us begin. What followed was unlike anything Issei had experienced since his reincarnation. Ddraig opened his consciousness completely, sharing not just power but memories, experiences, and knowledge accumulated over millennia. In return, Issei shared Rimuru's memories, the struggles and triumphs of building a nation, the techniques and abilities that had made him legendary, the wisdom gained from leading others through impossible challenges. The exchange was overwhelming and exhilarating. Issei felt his understanding of magic, combat, and leadership expanding exponentially. More importantly, he felt the boosted gear beginning to evolve, incorporating elements from both power systems into something entirely new. Incredible, Ddraig breathed as the process continued. Your memories contain techniques that could revolutionize how sacred gears function. This predator ability of yours combined with my power to boost and transfer energy. Analysis. Successful integration of predator functionality with boosted gear architecture detected. New hybrid abilities becoming available. Issei could feel it, new possibilities opening up within his sacred gear. The ability to not just boost his own power, but to analyze and temporarily absorb his opponent's techniques. The potential to share his enhanced abilities with his teammates more efficiently. Most intriguingly, the beginning stages of what Great Sage identified as universal synthesis integration. We should test these new capabilities, Ddraig said with barely contained excitement. But carefully, gradually. The rating game tomorrow will provide an excellent opportunity. Speaking of which, Issei said, feeling their mental conference beginning to wind down, I have a request. Oh, in the memories I carry, Veldora and I developed combination techniques that used both our abilities simultaneously. Would you be willing to try something similar? Partner, after what we've just shared, I would be honored to fight alongside you in whatever manner you deem most effective. As the mental space began to fade, returning Issei to his physical body, he felt a profound sense of completion. For the first time since his reincarnation, all aspects of his identity felt truly unified. Issei's heart, Rimuru's memories, Great Sage's analysis, and now Ddraig's partnership. Rest well, partner. Tomorrow, we show the world what true cooperation can accomplish. The raiding game arena materialized around them in a flash of magical light, a replica of Q Academy, but empty of students and civilians. Issei stood with his teammates in their designated starting position, feeling the familiar weight of the boosted gear on his arm and the comforting presence of his partners in his mind. Across the battlefield, he could sense Riser's peerage taking their positions. 15 opponents, each formidable in their own right, led by an immortal phoenix who had never known defeat. Analysis, all enemy positions identified. Tactical assessment confirms viability of primary strategy. Recommend initiation of Phase 1. The new abilities are responding well, Ddraig reported. I can sense the modifications integrating smoothly with my base functions. Everyone ready? Issei asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had become second nature over their weeks of training. Ready, came the unified response from his teammates. Issei smiled, feeling the familiar calm that preceded major battles. In his memories, Rimuru had faced impossible odds many times and had won through careful planning, innovative tactics, and absolute trust in his companions. Riaz, he said formally, with your permission, she nodded, understanding that this moment represented a fundamental shift in their dynamic. The battlefield is yours, Issei. Boosted gear, the familiar gauntlet materialized, but this time it felt different, heavier, more complex, thrumming with new possibilities. Balance Breaker, the armor that engulfed him, was recognizably the boosted gear's evolved form, but enhanced with subtle modifications. Great Sage's analytical capabilities were now fully integrated with the armor's sensors, providing real-time tactical information. Ddraig's power flowed through him with unprecedented smoothness, no longer feeling like borrowed strength but like a natural extension of his own abilities. Most remarkably, he could sense new functions awakening, abilities that represented a fusion of Rimuru's skills with draconic power. Balance Breaker, Welsh Dragon Scale Male, Tempest Integration, Great Sage announced. All systems optimal, ready for combat operations. Phase 1, Issei commanded, his voice carrying clearly to his teammates through their communication link. Kiba, establish the perimeter. Koneko, mobile anchor position. Akano, area denial on my mark. Rias, overwatch and fire support. As his team moved with practiced precision, Issei activated one of his new hybrid abilities. Predator analysis, the world exploded with information. Every member of Riser's peerage was suddenly visible to him, their positions, power levels, current activities, and tactical intentions laid bare by an enhanced version of Rimuru's signature skill. The integration with Ddraig's power allowed him to share this information instantly with his teammates. Enemy formation identified, he broadcast. They're using the standard Phoenix doctrine, overwhelming frontal assault relying on regeneration to absorb casualties. Kiba, incoming Knight class opponents from the East Wing. Koneko, Bishop class area magic incoming from your 2 o'clock. Akano, perfect lightning strike opportunity on the clustered pawns, 3rd floor northwest classroom. The battle that followed was unlike any raiding game in recorded history. Instead of the traditional piece-by-piece elimination that characterized most matches, Issei orchestrated a complex dance of coordinated strikes, tactical withdrawals, and strategic positioning that left Riser's peerage constantly off balance. Boost, the familiar multiplication of power, but now enhanced with Predator's analytical capabilities, allowing him to not just increase his strength, but to understand and counter his opponent's techniques in real time. When Riser's queen attempted to engage him directly, Issei used a combination technique he developed with Ddraig. Dragon Shot Predator Infusion. The energy blast didn't just carry devastating force, it also analyzed and temporarily absorbed aspects of her combat style, making him progressively more effective against her specific fighting techniques. Remarkable, Ddraig's voice carried genuine awe. The integration is exceeding all projections. We're not just combining our abilities, we're creating entirely new forms of power. Confirmed. Current performance parameters suggest exponential improvement potential with continued integration. But the most impressive aspect wasn't Issei's individual performance, it was how he elevated his entire team. Using enhanced versions of Rimuru's leadership skills, he provided real-time tactical guidance that allowed each teammate to perform far beyond their normal capabilities. Kiba found himself moving with impossible precision, his swords creating barriers and choke points exactly where they were needed most. Akano's lightning strikes became surgical instruments, disabling specific opponents at the perfect moments. Koneko's strength was deployed with tactical brilliance, turning her into a mobile fortress that controlled key battlefield positions. Most importantly, Rias was freed from the burden of tactical decision-making, allowing her to focus entirely on her destructive magic. With Issei coordinating the overall battle, she became the strategic hammer that shattered enemy formations at precisely the right moments. "This is impossible," came Riser's voice over the communication system, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine confusion. "How are 5 devils coordinating this effectively?" The answer was simple but revolutionary. They weren't fighting as 5 individuals. They were fighting as a single organism with 5 specialized functions, coordinated by a leader who had learned from the greatest demon lord in existence how to transform individual strengths into collective power. As the battle progressed, Issei began integrating more advanced techniques. When facing multiple opponents simultaneously, he activated Universal Analysis, a fusion of Great Sage's computational power with the boosted gear's energy manipulation that allowed him to process multiple combat scenarios simultaneously and respond to each threat with perfect efficiency. "Partner, your growth rate is extraordinary. At this pace, you'll surpass the limitations of traditional sacred gear classification entirely." Analysis. Current integration success rate suggests potential for accessing advanced Tempest Federation techniques within current operational parameters. The turning point came when Riser himself entered the battle, confident that his immortality would allow him to simply outlast Issei's team. He hadn't accounted for Issei's most devastating new ability. Predator Boost, Issei commanded, activating a technique that combined Rimuru's signature absorption ability with Ddraig's power multiplication. Instead of simply doubling his own strength, he began to temporarily absorb and analyze Riser's Phoenix regeneration itself. The result was unprecedented. Not only did Issei's attacks begin to overcome Riser's healing, but he started to understand the fundamental mechanics of Phoenix immortality. With each exchange, he became more effective against regeneration-based defenses. Impossible, Riser's shock was evident as his supposedly unlimited healing began to slow, then falter under Issei's increasingly effective attacks. Analysis: Phoenix regeneration operates on specific magical frequencies. Current absorption rate allows for development of targeted countermeasures. But Issei wasn't content with simply defeating Riser. He wanted to demonstrate the full potential of coordinated teamwork. As the Phoenix Lord grew desperate, launching increasingly powerful but poorly coordinated attacks, Issei orchestrated the final combination sequence they'd practiced. "Formation Delta," he announced. "Synchronized strike on my mark." What followed was a display of tactical coordination that left the supernatural world's observers speechless. 5 devils moving with perfect unity, each contributing their unique strengths to a combined attack that was exponentially more powerful than the sum of its parts. The battle ended not with Riser's destruction, but with his complete tactical defeat, surrounded, outmaneuvered, and facing opponents who had demonstrated abilities far beyond anything in their official records. "I yield," Riser said finally, his voice carrying a mixture of shock and grudging respect. I've never faced coordination of this caliber." In the aftermath of their victory, as they stood in the arena receiving congratulations from amazed observers, Issei felt a profound sense of completion. He had successfully integrated his past and present, used Rimuru's memories and abilities to protect those he cared about, and forged genuine partnerships with both his teammates and his sacred gear. "Well done, partner," Ddraig said with deep satisfaction. "That was the most enjoyable battle I've experienced in centuries. Performance exceeded all projections. Integration success rate, 97%. Recommend continued development of hybrid techniques." But as they celebrated their victory, none of them noticed the subtle distortions in spacetime around the arena, signs that their unprecedented display of power had indeed attracted attention from forces beyond their world. The rating game was over, but a much larger game was just beginning. The Underworld's response to their rating game victory was swift and overwhelming. Within hours of their triumph over Riser, magical communications flooded the Gremory estate, formal requests for audiences, invitations to political gatherings, and most concerning of all, direct summons from the 4 great Satans themselves. Issei stood in Ria's family mansion, still processing the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. The rating game had been broadcast throughout the supernatural world, and his unprecedented tactical coordination had apparently shaken the foundations of Devil Society's understanding of what was possible. Analysis: current political attention level exceeds safe operational parameters. Recommend careful management of public appearances and information disclosure. "I warned you that your unique abilities would attract observers," Ddraig reminded him. "The question now is how we handle the scrutiny without revealing the full extent of your capabilities." "Issei," Riaz approached him with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "Surzets has requested a formal meeting with the entire peerage. The other Satans will be present as well." The implications were staggering. The 4 great Satans, the most powerful devils in existence, wanted to personally meet with a newly reincarnated pawn. In his memories as Rimuru, such attention from the highest levels of government had usually preceded either exceptional opportunities or exceptional dangers. "When?" he asked, his voice carrying the calm authority that had become natural since accessing his past life's experiences. "Tomorrow evening. It's being framed as a celebration of our victory, but..." Riaz trailed off, her expression troubled. "But they want to understand how we achieved what should have been impossible," Issei finished. "Don't worry. I've dealt with political inquiries before." The statement should have sounded absurd coming from a teenage devil, but the confidence in his voice made it entirely believable. Rimuru's memories included countless diplomatic encounters, from negotiating with demon lords to establishing treaties between species that had been enemies for millennia. Recommend preparation of multiple response strategies based on likely inquiry directions, Great Sage advised. Political entities will focus on tactical innovations, power source analysis, and potential threat assessment. That evening, Issei found himself in his room, reviewing everything he knew about devil politics through the lens of his inherited memories. The supernatural world operated on a complex web of alliances, territorial rights, and power balances that reminded him of the early days of Tempest Federation, when every conversation could determine whether former enemies became allies or remained threats. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your performance was most impressive. We should meet. A friend who understands the burden of unique power." The message sent chills down his spine. Someone with access to his personal contact information, someone who claimed to understand his situation, someone who had been watching the rating game closely enough to identify him as uniquely powerful. Analysis. Message origin untraceable through conventional means. Sender demonstrates advanced information gathering capabilities and potential knowledge of host's true nature. "This feels like a recruitment attempt," Ddraig observed grimly. Several organizations in the supernatural world specialize in acquiring individuals with unusual abilities. Issei deleted the message without responding, but the encounter reminded him that their victory had made them visible to forces beyond the traditional devil hierarchy. In Rimuru's memories were countless examples of how rapid advancement attracted both opportunities and threats from unexpected directions. The meeting with the four great Satans took place in the Gremory family's formal conference chamber, a space designed to project power and authority through every architectural detail. As Issei entered with his teammates, he automatically analyzed the room's magical defenses, the positioning of furniture to encourage specific psychological responses, and the subtle power displays built into the very walls. "Impressive magical architecture," he thought to Great Sage, designed to make visitors feel both honored and intimidated. Confirmed, environmental psychology consistent with high-level political manipulation techniques. The four Satans were exactly what Issei had expected based on Rias' descriptions and his own analytical observations. Zerzet's radiated controlled power beneath a friendly exterior. Seraphal projected calculated cheerfulness that barely concealed sharp intelligence. Ajuka's quiet demeanor masked analytical brilliance that rivaled Great Sage's capabilities, and Falbium's apparent laziness disguised strategic thinking of the highest order. "Welcome," Zerzet began with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Please sit, we have much to discuss." As they took their seats, Issei noticed the subtle positioning, his chair placed to encourage direct conversation with all four Satans while slightly isolating him from his teammates. Classic interrogation psychology designed to make him feel like the focus of attention while subtly pressuring him to speak independently. They're treating this as an intelligence-gathering operation disguised as a celebration, he realized. "Your performance against Riser was remarkable," Ajuka said, his tone carefully neutral. "The tactical coordination you demonstrated hasn't been seen in raiding games for centuries. How did you develop such advanced strategic thinking so quickly?" The question was politely phrased but loaded with implications. They wanted to understand not just what he'd done, but how it was possible for a supposedly new devil to possess such capabilities. Issei drew on Rimuru's diplomatic experience, recognizing that this conversation would establish his relationship with Devil Society's leadership for years to come. He needed to provide enough information to satisfy their curiosity while maintaining enough mystery to protect his true capabilities. "I've been having very vivid dreams since my reincarnation," he said, maintaining eye contact with each Satan in turn. "Dreams of someone who understood leadership, who had experience building unity among diverse groups. Those experiences felt instructive." "Dreams," Seraphal repeated thoughtfully. "Soul echoes from previous incarnations are extremely rare, but not unprecedented. Usually, however, such memories are fragmentary, emotional rather than tactical." "She's fishing for more specific information about the nature and extent of the memories," Great Sage observed. "Recommend cautious expansion of current explanation." "These dreams are remarkably detailed," Issei admitted. "I remember specific techniques for coordination, methods for analyzing opponents, approaches to turning individual strengths into collective advantages. It's as if someone with extensive military experience is sharing their knowledge." "Fascinating," Falbium said, speaking for the first time, His apparently casual tone didn't fool Issei. The Satan of military affairs was intensely interested in the tactical implications. This dream person, they were a military commander, among other things, someone who built something lasting from chaos, who understood that true strength comes from bringing people together rather than standing alone. The four Satans exchanged subtle glances, a silent communication that spoke of shared concerns and coordinated questioning strategies. Issei, Surzech leaned forward slightly. The techniques you demonstrated yesterday included some elements that don't match any known devil magic systems. The way you shared tactical information with your team, for instance, or the enhanced analysis capabilities you displayed. Where do these abilities come from? This was the critical moment. Issei could feel the weight of their attention, the subtle magical scanning that was attempting to analyze his power signature, the careful assessment of his every word and gesture. He thought about Rimuru's approach to similar situations, the balance between revelation and concealment that had allowed him to navigate complex political landscapes while protecting his people and maintaining his freedom of action. I believe my sacred gear is evolving in response to the memories I'm accessing, he said carefully. The boosted gear has always been adaptable, responding to its host's needs and growth. Perhaps it's incorporating elements from these inherited experiences. Excellent response, Ddraig approved. You're attributing the unusual abilities to my evolution rather than revealing the true extent of your integration with past life memories. Ajuka's eyes sharpened with professional interest. Sacred gear evolution driven by soul memory integration would be an unprecedented phenomenon. Would you be willing to undergo some non-invasive testing to help us understand this process? Danger. Research requests from beings of this power level could reveal information we cannot safely share. I'd be honored to contribute to your research, Issei replied diplomatically, but I'd prefer to understand the full scope of these changes myself before subjecting them to analysis. The evolution process seems to be ongoing, and I wouldn't want incomplete data to lead to incorrect conclusions. It was a polite way of declining while expressing willingness to cooperate in the future, a classic diplomatic maneuver that Rimuru had used countless times when dealing with requests he couldn't safely fulfill immediately. Of course, Surzech said smoothly, we wouldn't want to interfere with a natural development process. Perhaps in a few months, once your abilities have stabilized. That seems reasonable. The conversation continued for another hour, touching on topics ranging from Devil Society's tactical doctrine to potential applications of coordinated combat techniques. Throughout, Issei found himself drawing on memories of similar political discussions from his past life. The careful dance of information sharing, mutual assessment, and relationship building that characterized high-level diplomacy. What became clear was that the four Satans saw him as both an opportunity and a potential concern. His tactical innovations could revolutionize Devil military doctrine, but his unprecedented development rate and unusual abilities made him an unknown quantity in their carefully balanced political structure. They're trying to determine whether you're a valuable asset to be cultivated or a potential threat to be managed, Ddraig observed. Analysis confirms. Current conversation patterns suggest evaluation for both recruitment potential and threat assessment. As the meeting wound down, Falbium made an unexpected proposal. Issei, would you be interested in consulting on some tactical problems we've been facing? Your perspective on coordination and strategic innovation could be invaluable. The offer was both flattering and dangerous. Accepting would provide access to high-level military intelligence and political influence, but it would also place him under increased scrutiny and potentially compromise his independence. Drawing on Rimuru's experience with similar offers, Issei crafted his response carefully. I'd be honored to help, but I'd want to ensure that any assistance I provide serves the broader peace rather than partisan interests. In the dreams I remember, the most successful strategies were those that protected everyone, not just one faction. The statement revealed his philosophical approach while subtly establishing conditions for any future cooperation. It was exactly the kind of principled but pragmatic response that Rimuru had used to navigate complex political alliances. Surzech smiled, and this time the expression seemed genuinely pleased. That's a remarkably mature perspective. We'll definitely want to continue these conversations in the future. After they left the formal meeting, Riaz walked with Issei through the mansion's gardens, both of them processing what had just occurred. That went better than I expected, she said finally. You handled their questions brilliantly. "It's not over," Issei replied, his analytical mind still processing the political implications. "Today was an assessment. They'll be watching to see how I develop, how I use whatever influence I've gained, whether I represent an opportunity or a threat to the current order." Correct analysis. Initial contact with high-level political entities typically initiates extended evaluation periods. "You're thinking like someone with experience in these situations," Riaz observed. "The person in your dreams, they dealt with this kind of political complexity regularly. Among other things, building something meaningful always requires navigating the interests of those who already hold power. The key is finding ways to grow stronger while making yourself valuable rather than threatening to existing structures." As they walked, Issei became aware that they were being observed not by hostile forces, but by additional security personnel that hadn't been present before. His enhanced capabilities had earned him increased protection, but also increased surveillance. "The price of visibility," he mused. "Every display of exceptional ability brings both opportunities and constraints." That evening, as Issei reviewed the day's events and planned for the challenges ahead, he received another anonymous message. "Your political performance was as impressive as your tactical abilities. You understand the game better than most realize. We should definitely meet soon. Your friend who appreciates careful players." This time, the message felt less like a recruitment attempt and more like recognition, someone who appreciated the subtle diplomatic maneuvering he'd displayed, someone who understood the complexity of navigating supernatural politics while maintaining independence and principles. "Multiple unknown entities are showing interest in your development," Great Sage observed. "Recommend increased caution regarding unsolicited contact attempts." Agreed. "Your performance today has definitely attracted attention from sources beyond the official devil hierarchy." As he prepared for sleep, Issei reflected on how much his life had changed since his reincarnation. From a simple perverted high school student to a tactical coordinator who could hold his own in conversations with the most powerful devils in existence, the transformation was remarkable even by the standards of his inherited memories. But more than personal growth, he was beginning to see opportunities to influence the larger supernatural world. The tactical innovations they demonstrated in the raiding game could revolutionize how conflicts were resolved. The diplomatic principles he'd learned from Rimuru could help bridge divides between traditional enemies. "The foundation is being laid," he thought as sleep claimed him. "Now I need to build carefully just like before." In his dreams that night, he stood once again in the Great Hall of Tempest Federation, surrounded by humans and monsters who had learned to work together toward common goals. But this time, the faces around him included Riaz, Akano, Kiba, and Koneko, his new family, his new nation to protect and guide. The vision felt less like a memory and more like a promise of what could be built in this world as well. The next morning brought news that would accelerate Issei's political education considerably. A formal invitation had arrived from an unexpected source. The Norse pantheon requested his presence at a diplomatic gathering designed to address emerging tactical innovations in supernatural conflict resolution. Analysis. Multiple mythological factions are taking notice of recent developments. This represents significant expansion of political complexity. "The game is expanding beyond devil politics," Ddraig observed with interest. "Your innovations have attracted attention from pantheons that rarely involve themselves in underworld affairs." As Issei read the formal invitation, written in multiple languages and sealed with magical signatures that spoke of ancient power, he realized that the raiding game victory had consequences far beyond what any of them had anticipated. The supernatural world was taking notice of the unusual devil who fought like a general and spoke like a diplomat. Soon, he would need to decide how to use that attention to build something meaningful, just as Rimuru had done in another world, in what felt like another lifetime. The political tempests were just beginning, and Issei would need all of his inherited wisdom to navigate the storms ahead while protecting those he cared about and building toward a better future for everyone. The Norse diplomatic gathering was unlike anything Issei had experienced, even with Rimuru's extensive memories of international summits and supernatural negotiations. Held in a neutral dimensional space that existed between realms, the venue itself projected power on a scale that dwarfed even the Four Satans conference chamber. Representatives from dozens of mythological factions filled the crystalline hall, Norse gods radiating ancient authority. Egyptian deities whose presence seemed to bend reality around them, Hindu pantheon members whose power signatures registered as nearly incomprehensible to his enhanced senses. At the center of it all sat Odin himself, the Allfather's single eye studying Issei with interest that felt both calculating and amused. Analysis: gathered entities represent combined power equivalent to multiple demon lord-class beings. Recommend extreme diplomatic caution. This level of attention is unprecedented for a newly reincarnated devil, Ddraig observed privately. Your tactical innovations have clearly resonated beyond what we anticipated. Issei Hyodo, Odin's voice carried the weight of millennia, the Red Dragon Emperor whose recent victory has prompted considerable discussion among the pantheons. Please approach. As Issei walked forward, he drew on every diplomatic memory Rimuru had accumulated. The key to navigating gatherings of this magnitude was projecting confidence without arrogance, showing respect without submission, and demonstrating value without revealing full capabilities. "Honored Odin," he said, bowing appropriately, "I'm grateful for the invitation, though I confess surprise at the level of interest my small victory has generated." Several of the assembled deities chuckled at his diplomatic understatement. Calling the complete tactical domination of an immortal phoenix a small victory showed both humility and confidence in equal measure. "Small," Thor laughed, his voice booming through the hall. "You coordinated 5 devils to fight as a single organism against superior numbers. That kind of battlefield unity hasn't been seen since the Great War." Accurate assessment. "Your tactical innovations represent fundamental advancement in supernatural combat coordination." A new voice interjected, one that carried analytical precision similar to Great Sage. "I am Thoth. Your methods intrigue me considerably." The Egyptian god of wisdom materialized beside Odin's throne, his presence immediately recognizable to Issei's enhanced senses as a being whose intellectual capabilities rivaled even Great Sage's analytical functions. "Warning: divine-level analytical entity detected. Recommend careful information management." "You're analyzing my techniques," Issei observed, meeting Thoth's gaze directly. "I'm honored by your professional interest, but also curious about what specific aspects draw your attention." "Direct communication protocols, real-time tactical adaptation, seamless power sharing between team members," Thoth enumerated with obvious fascination. "These represent innovations that could fundamentally alter how supernatural conflicts are resolved." "That's precisely why we've called this gathering," Odin interjected. "Young Hyodo, your methods suggest possibilities for reducing casualties in territorial disputes, for resolving conflicts through superior coordination rather than superior destruction. They're interested in applying your tactical innovations to reduce the scale of supernatural warfare," Ddraig realized. "This could be an opportunity to influence global supernatural policy." The implications were staggering. In his memories, Rimuru had dreamed of creating systems that prevented conflicts rather than simply winning them. The idea that his tactical innovations might contribute to broader peace rather than just personal victory aligned perfectly with his deepest values. "I'm honored by your confidence," Issei replied carefully, "but I should mention that my techniques are still developing. The coordination methods I demonstrated are just the beginning of what might be possible." "Elaborate," commanded a voice like shifting sand. Ra, the Egyptian sun god, his attention focusing on Issei with the intensity of solar radiation. Drawing on Rimuru's experience with similar requests for information, Issei crafted his response to provide enough detail to demonstrate value while maintaining operational security. "The foundation is shared consciousness, not mind reading, but real-time communication of tactical intentions and situational awareness. When every team member understands not just their own role, but how it fits into the larger strategy, coordination becomes exponentially more effective." Excellent explanation. "Demonstrates sophisticated understanding while avoiding specific technical details. But achieving that level of coordination requires trust beyond normal parameters," Issei continued. "It only works when every team member is genuinely committed to collective success rather than individual glory." Freya, the Norse goddess of love and war, leaned forward with obvious interest. "You speak of trust as a tactical resource. That's unusual for someone your age." "Trust multiplies power," Issei replied, quoting one of Rimuru's fundamental leadership principles. "A team where everyone trusts everyone else can take risks and attempt combinations that would be impossible otherwise." But building that level of trust requires leadership that consistently prioritizes collective welfare over personal advantage. The assembled deities exchanged glances that spoke of shared recognition. They were hearing philosophy that aligned with their own experiences leading pantheons and managing divine hierarchies. "Young dragon," Odin said thoughtfully, "your wisdom seems remarkably developed for someone of your apparent age and experience. They're probing for information about the source of your knowledge and capabilities. I've been having vivid dreams since my reincarnation," Issei explained, using the cover story that had proven effective with the four Satans. "Dreams of someone who understood leadership, who built something meaningful from chaos. Those experiences feel instructive." "Soul echoes," Thoth murmured with professional interest, "memories from previous incarnations. Rare but not unprecedented among beings of exceptional spiritual development. They're accepting the partial explanation while clearly recognizing there's more to investigate." Brahma, who had remained silent until now, spoke with a voice like cosmic wind. "These dreams, they include methods for bringing former enemies together as allies." The question struck directly at the heart of Rimuru's greatest achievements. Building Tempest Federation had required transforming centuries-old hatreds into collaborative relationships, turning traditional enemies into trusted partners. "Yes," Issei said simply, "I remember techniques for helping people see past their differences to focus on common goals, methods for building organizations where everyone benefits from collective success." "Fascinating," Odin mused. "Such knowledge could indeed transform how our various pantheons interact. We've maintained our territories and spheres of influence for millennia, but collaboration has always been challenging. They're considering applications beyond immediate tactical concerns," Great Sage observed. "This conversation is moving toward broader diplomatic and organizational implications." The discussion that followed was unlike anything Issei had anticipated. Instead of being interrogated about his abilities, he found himself consulting on millennia-old political problems between pantheons. His inherited memories provided perspectives that the assembled deities found genuinely valuable. Approaches to conflict resolution that they hadn't considered, methods for building trust between traditional rivals, organizational structures that could accommodate vastly different cultural and power dynamics. "You're essentially conducting a diplomatic consulting session with the leadership of multiple mythological pantheons," Ddraig observed with amazement. "The scope of your influence is expanding exponentially." Hours passed in intensive discussion. Issei found himself drawing on memories of countless diplomatic sessions from his past life, adapting Rimuru's techniques for building interspecies cooperation to the challenges of interpantheon relations. The breakthrough came when he suggested a pilot program, a limited collaboration between willing pantheons on a specific project that would demonstrate the effectiveness of coordinated approaches without requiring anyone to compromise their fundamental independence. "A joint response to the growing dimensional instability issues," he proposed. "Multiple pantheons working together to address tiers in reality that threaten all realms equally. Shared intelligence, coordinated response protocols, combined task forces when appropriate." The suggestion resonated immediately. Dimensional instabilities were a universal concern, threats that transcended traditional territorial boundaries and required responses beyond what any single pantheon could provide effectively. "Brilliant," Thoth said with obvious admiration. "A challenge that naturally requires collaboration, providing opportunities to develop trust and coordination without threatening existing power structures. Excellent strategic thinking. You're creating opportunities for relationship building while addressing genuine shared concerns." As the gathering concluded, Odin approached Issei privately. "Young Hyodo, your counsel today has been remarkably valuable. Would you be willing to serve as an advisor on future collaborative efforts between pantheons?" The offer was both flattering and dangerous. Accepting would provide incredible opportunities to influence supernatural policy on a global scale, but it would also place him at the center of political dynamics that could become incredibly complex. Drawing on Rimuru's experience with similar invitations, Issei crafted his response carefully. "I'd be honored to help, but I'd want to ensure that any advice I provide serves the cause of peace and mutual benefit rather than partisan interests. In the memories I carry, the most successful collaborations were those that genuinely improved life for everyone involved." Spoken like a true diplomat, Odin smiled, clearly pleased by the principled response. "We'll be in touch," The return journey to Kyoto provided time to process what had just occurred. In a single day, Issei had gone from being a locally notable devil to serving as an advisor to multiple divine pantheons on matters of international supernatural policy. Your influence trajectory is unprecedented, Great Sage observed. Current political positioning suggests potential for significant impact on global supernatural relations. The question, Ddraig added thoughtfully, is whether you're prepared for the responsibilities that come with this level of influence. Issei considered the question as familiar landscapes flashed past their transportation portal. In his memories, Rimuru had faced similar moments, points where increased power and influence brought proportionally increased responsibility for others' welfare. I think, he said finally, the real question is whether I'm willing to accept those responsibilities. And the answer is yes, as long as I can use this influence to build something better. That evening, he found himself in the Occult Research Club room with his teammates, sharing what had occurred at the Divine Gathering. Their reactions ranged from amazement to concern. "You're moving in circles that most devils never even hear about," Riaz said, her voice mixing pride with worry. "The level of trust these entities are placing in you is extraordinary, but it also means they'll have high expectations for your future performance. More than that," Akeno added thoughtfully, "it means you're becoming a political figure whether you intended to or not. Your opinions and actions will have consequences far beyond our immediate circle." Koneko, characteristically direct, asked the essential question, "Are you ready for that kind of responsibility?" Issei thought about the question seriously. In his memories, Rimuru had never sought political power for its own sake. It had always been a tool for protecting others and building something meaningful. The same principle seemed to apply here. "I'm ready to use whatever influence I gain to help people," he said finally. "Whether that makes me a political figure or not doesn't really matter. What matters is whether I can make things better for the people I care about and for everyone else who deserves a chance at peace and happiness." Consistent with core personality parameters from previous incarnation. Primary motivation remains protection and advancement of community welfare. That philosophy served you well in your past life, partner. I suspect it will serve you equally well in this one. But as they continued their discussion, none of them noticed the subtle magical emanations from several dimensional observation points around the school. Issei's rapid rise to supernatural prominence had indeed attracted attention from forces beyond even the divine pantheons, entities from other realities who were beginning to take interest in the unusual soul who seemed to bridge multiple worlds. The storms on the horizon were about to become much more complex than anyone anticipated. 3 days later, the first direct contact came in the form of a letter that materialized on Issei's desk during his morning classes. The paper felt wrong, not quite material, existing in several dimensions simultaneously, written in script that seemed to shift between languages as he read. "Greetings, Rimuru Tempest. Yes, we know who you truly are. Your recent activities have attracted attention from those who monitor dimensional stability. We represent interests that transcend single realities. A meeting would be beneficial for all concerned. Your cooperation would be appreciated, but is not strictly necessary. We will contact you again soon." The Dimensional Oversight Collective, the message dissolved into nothingness as soon as he finished reading, leaving no physical evidence but the certainty that his carefully managed secret had been discovered by entities with capabilities that dwarfed even the divine pantheons. Analysis: extra-dimensional entities with advanced surveillance capabilities have identified host's true nature. Threat assessment: unknown but potentially extreme. This is what I was afraid of, partner. Your unique nature creates ripples that beings from other realities can detect. You may be dealing with forces that view you as either a valuable asset or a dangerous anomaly. As Issei sat in his ordinary classroom, surrounded by ordinary students discussing ordinary teenage concerns, he realized that the political complexities he'd been navigating were about to become exponentially more challenging. The storms on the horizon had just become interdimensional. That's a wrap on part 1. I hope you found it valuable and engaging. Part 2 is coming soon, and I don't want you to miss it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when part 2 drops. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was your favorite takeaway from part 1? What are you most excited to see in part 2? Any specific what-ifs you want me to cover next? Your feedback helps me create better content for you. Like this video if part 1 was helpful and share it with your friends. And I'll see you in part 2.